Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to today's Friday Reflections on this Friday, the 29th of November 2024. I hope you are well wherever you are listening to this from. Today, I would like to answer a question that I've been asked at various times over the years, and a few students in Indonesia were asking recently. Is philosophy haram, that is religiously prohibited within Islam? So, to help answer that question, I have a book here by an esteemed scholar of Islam from Andalusia, as it was known at the time, Muslim Spain. And this scholar, his name is Ibn Rushd, and he's also studied in the West. And in the West, he is known as Averroes. And this book is called the Decisive, Treatise and Epistle Dedicatory. And within this book, I'm going to read from literally page 1. I mean, it's halfway through here because it's got a lot of introduction, but it's literally page 1 of his book, and a few pieces from the preceding pages. So here we are, and he begins, in the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. May Allah be prayed for Muhammad and his family, and may they be accorded peace. The jurist, Imam, judge, and uniquely learned Abu Walid Muhammad ibn Ahmed ibn Rushd, may God be pleased with him, said, "Praise be to God with all praises, and a prayer for Muhammad, his chosen servant and messenger." Now, the goal of this statement is for us to investigate from the perspective of law-based reflection, i.e. jurisprudence, whether reflection upon philosophy and the sciences of logic is permitted, prohibited, or commanded, and this as a recommendation or as an obligation by the law, i.e. literally by fiqh and sharia. So he begins with this point, A, that philosophy is obligatory. So we say if the activity of philosophy is nothing more than reflection upon existing things and consideration of them insofar as they are an indication of the artisan, I mean insofar as they are artifacts for existing things, indicate the artisan only through cognizance of the art in them, i.e. through understanding them, and the more complete cognizance of the art in them, the more complete is the cognizance of the artisan. So the more we understand the creation, the more we understand the cosmos and the art within the cosmos, the more we'll understand Allah. And if the law has recommended and urged consideration of existing things, then it is evident that what this name indicates is either obligatory or recommended by the law. That the law calls for consideration of existing things by means of the intellect and for pursuing cognizance of them by means of it is evident from various verses in the book of God, i.e. the Quran. May he be blessed and exalted. There is his statement where he be exalted. Consider you who have sight. This is in Surah 59, Ayah 2. This is a text for the obligation of using both intellectual and law-based syllogistic reasoning. And there is his statement, may he be exalted. Have they not reflected upon the kingdoms of the heavens and the earth and what things God has created? Surah 7, Ayah 185. This is a text urging reflection upon all existing things, and God, may he be exalted, has made it known that one of those whom he has selected and venerated by means of this knowledge was Abraham, the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Thus he, may he be exalted, said, and in this way we made Abraham see the kingdoms of the heavens and the earth, that he might be, and so on to the end of the verse in Surah 6, Ayah 75. And he, may he be exalted, said, do they not reflect upon the camels, how they have been created, and upon the heaven, how it has been raised up? This is in Surah 88, verse 17. And he said, and they ponder at the creation of the heavens and the earth, Surah 3, Ayah 191, and so on in innumerable other verses. Since it has been determined that the law makes it obligatory to reflect upon existing things by means of the intellect and to consider them, and consideration is nothing more than inferring and drawing out the unknown from the known, and this is syllogistic reasoning, or by means of syllogistic reasoning, therefore it is obligatory that we go about reflecting upon the existing things by means of intellectual syllogistic reasoning, and it is evident that this manner of reflection the law calls for, this manner, and urges its most complete kind of reflection by means of the complete kind of syllogistic reasoning, and is the one called demonstration. And he goes on and explains how, through reasoning is actually called for within the Holy Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah calls us to reflect. And as you saw there, he cited a number of verses. And again, a bit further down this page, he continues, nay, it is even more fitting that he do so, for if the jurist infers from his statement, may he be exalted, consider you who have sight, in Surah 59, Ayah 2, the obligation to become cognizant of cognizant of juridical syllogistic reasoning, then how much more fitting is it that one cognizant of God infer from the obligation to become cognizant of intellectual syllogistic reasoning? So I'll break that down in a simple term. Basically, he's saying if it's important for a jurist, for a scholar of the fiqh, of the jurisprudence, of the Sharia, to understand the Sharia, so understand like hadiths and Quran and what they're referring to, how much more is it important to develop an understanding of God from reflecting upon the creation and through the intellect? And he continues and says, it is not for someone to say, now this kind of reflection about intellectual syllogistic reasoning is a heretical innovation, since it did not exist in the earliest days of Islam. For reflection upon juridical syllogistic reasoning and its kinds is also something inferred after the earliest days. Yet it is not opined to be a heretical innovation. So here, Ibn Rushd is highlighting how the development of the sciences of fiqh, of the sciences of jurisprudence, of studying and analyzing hadith and what they mean and how they apply to us within religious law, that develops later on. So we don't look at that as heretical. We don't think that's heretical. So if we don't think that's heretical, why would we think it's heretical to reflect upon the creation and to do intellectual reasoning? It's illogical. It doesn't make sense. And Ibn Rushd says, so it is obligatory to believe the same about reflection upon intellectual syllogistic reasoning. And for this, there is a reason, but this is not the place to mention it. Moreover, most of the adherents to this religion support intellectual syllogistic reasoning, except for a small group of strict literalists, and they are refuted by the texts of the Quran. So interestingly, going back to when did Ibn Rushd live? He lived in the 12th century AD, which that's the 5th or 6th century Al-Hijra. So he lived quite early on within the history of Islam. And he highlighted something here by saying that most of the Muslims at that time supported intellectual reasoning, except for a small group of strict literalists. So the people that rejected this, who rejected reasoning or rejected philosophy, were actually in the minority. The people who supported intellectual reasoning and the study of philosophy were actually in the majority. And that's during the 12th century CE, or during I think it's the 5th or 6th century Al-Hijra. And so Ibn Rushd goes on to say, since this has been determined that the law makes reflection upon intellectual syllogistic reasoning and its kinds obligatory, just as it makes reflection upon juridical syllogistic reasoning obligatory, therefore it is evident if someone prior to us has not set out to investigate intellectual syllogistic reasoning and its kinds, it's obligatory for us to begin and investigate it, and for the one who comes after us to rely upon the one who preceded. So here, to make it a bit simpler, because this is very, very academic language, he's saying that if people did this kind of reasoning and philosophy, if they hadn't done this previously, it would be an obligation upon us to do it. And also it would be an obligation upon those that come after us to learn from us. But on the other hand, if there were people who did this previously, then it's an obligation upon us to study what they said. And I will just skip down here a little bit to where he highlights that. He said, I mean those ancients who reflected upon these things before the religion of Islam. Since this is the case, and all that is needed with respect to reflection about the matter of intellectual syllogistic reasonings has been investigated by the ancients in the most complete manner, therefore we ought perhaps to seize their books in our hands and to reflect upon what they have said about it. And if it is all correct, we will accept it from them. Whereas if there is anything not correct in it, we will alert people to it. So I'm not going to read any more from this, because this is a very good book and I highly recommend it. It is available actually on Amazon if anybody wants to buy it. So you can study it for yourself. But basically, within this fatwa here, Ibn Rushd highlights that it is halal to study philosophy and halal to study the sciences and the knowledges of those who came before Islam. And not just is it halal, but it's actually obligatory upon us, according to Ibn Rushd, because they've developed knowledge and that knowledge is potentially useful for us, so we should study it. If there is good in it, we should accept the good in it. If there is any mistakes in it, we should study it and then highlight what we believe to be mistaken. But either way, we should study it. And it is a very important book in the history of Islam. And it kind of saddens me slightly that it has been more embraced by people who aren't Muslims than by Muslims. But the man was a great scholar, and we shouldn't ignore what he said. And it is the view of many today that perhaps if Muslims had adopted these ideas more in more recent times, instead of moving away from this approach, then the Muslim world probably wouldn't be as far behind as it is in many respects, and would have made a lot more significant developments and contributions to human civilization in more recent times, instead of us just looking back to a golden age. It was golden because of people like Ibn Rushd. I will leave that there. I hope that you found that useful. And if you're in the UK, enjoy the rest of the day and have a wonderful weekend. And wherever you are in the world, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.